should have all permissions. Oh, wait, we don't want to do that.
There we go.
Hang on a second.
Yeah.
We started the webinar.
We
You're
got
right, I do.
Thank you.
Yeah, a little bit of housekeeping. So we have a Q&A section. I'll keep an eye on that. So if anybody has a question, please put that in the Q&A. It's, I enabled both the Q&A and the chat because I wasn't thinking very clearly. So I'll try to keep both together, but if you have a question, post it in Q&A. We'll make sure that we're answering that because we do want to get everyone's questions answered today. And then we have a special surprise for everybody at the end of the call if you attended. So can't wait to get to that either. And without further ado, let's get rolling.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. So we got what, 3 hours, Leia, right? Okay.
We could talk about it for 3 hours, but I think we have 45 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just say like every third word then. But so anyhow, a lot of information we're going to go through, try to keep it at a level that everybody can kind of understand. But so we may or may not touch specifically on your exact situation, what you're doing. So obviously this is not to be meant to be any kind of advice and whatnot. I should say specific advice. Anyhow, one of the reasons why we always like to have this conversation is, okay, Leia, what does Swiss cheese, donuts, and insurance policies have in common?
Sounds like, what is holes?
There we go. Yeah, so that's one of the biggest issues that we'll go through as part of our discussion relating to cyber insurance. But ultimately, we'll deal with the top things that everybody needs to know or address. To give you a little bit of background, I'm the Chief Risk Officer for Duncan Financial Group. I speak nationally. I have, as you'll see in a moment, I have published 4 books, 3 of which have gone #1 Amazon Business. I not only oversee the risks and issues associated with Duncan Financial Group, but also oversee all of our clients and our risk management subsidiary. So there's a lot of things for us to dig in on this, and I am joined by Leia, who is the Chief Security Officer of InTech Solutions. Her and I have worked quite frequently over the last year or so, and it's never ceases to amaze me the stuff that we run into. So setting the stage, why everybody is so concerned about this, besides seeing what's in the newspaper, as we all know, cybercrime is on the rise. It is not slowing up. It continues to get worse, and it keeps costing more and more money. The reason why everybody is panicking is everybody's cyber insurance premiums are going up. And not only are they going up, but the insurance companies are also saying, hey, wait a minute, we are putting more requirements on you as an employer to make sure that we want to insure you. And that's where the rubber is meeting the road, so to speak. And not only that, but the reason why it's also a bigger concern is very few cyber thieves will ever get caught. So your only recourse, generally speaking, is going to be your insurance policy. And it's, as the adage is saying, the old adage used to say, there's those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. And I actually say there's those that have been hacked, those that will be hacked, and those that have been hacked and will be hacked again. It's because we've actually had some businesses that have had 2 cyber events now in the last couple of years. So setting a stage, still even further, this was kind of interesting. I don't have the 2022 data, but 47% are coming from hackers. That doesn't sound so very surprising, or malware. This was the interesting one. 24% were from vendors or managed services. And that is actually a concern because I know several of the ones we had have seen with clients. One of our clients was actually breached because their IT firm was breached. And the IT firm disabled the multi-factor from themselves when they remoted into our client to make life easier for themselves, and they opened the door.
Yeah. What's interesting, David, I was just talking about this earlier today. I was talking to one of our CMMC compliance clients, and I think that oftentimes when a business is securing or working with a managed services provider, that they're not thinking about the risk and the liability of engaging someone like that. Like, clearly, most organizations need that kind of help. But you give the keys of the kingdom away to someone, and have you properly vetted them? Because that organization is going to be a bigger target for malicious actors, because instead of a one-to-one, in other words, I'm just attacking your business, it's a one-to-many, where they just hit one MSP and now they can be on thousands of computers all at once. Like, that's a big hit.
Yeah, it is concerning. I was going to say, there's no time to ever let your guard down.
Yes. Oh, Andrew Grove, former CEO of Intel, he said, success breeds complacency, complacency breeds breeds failure. Only the paranoid survive.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep. So it's kind of interesting when you start looking at it, and you also have to understand there's a couple other things as we go through this that you might not think of from a cyber standpoint. Everybody's concerned about their own data. We just recently had an incident where, during the process of the client starting to get compliant with insurance company requirements for multi-factor for remote access for emails, for example, one of their board members happened to have his email hacked, sent out they went through their emails. They actually must have cloned it, went through, found an email that was sent out to a number of people, and was resent with basically an attached virus. We're waiting to see the implications because a customer opened it up and now has an ongoing event that is being cleaned up. One of the ones we're talking about this over the weekend. So here's something I want everybody to start thinking about. This might sound really strange when I'm about to talk about a hurricane, but it has to do with something else. So if I told you, Leia, in the mid-2000s, there's a hurricane bearing down on New Orleans, and after the aftermath, they do a postmortem and determine, surprise, surprise, the levees and pumps were a problem. Public transportation was not able to handle the number of people because of, over 100,000 people don't even own vehicles. So they end up housing them in a Superdome, which they determined was not a good place to do. What hurricane am I talking about?
Let me see. I'm thinking about Isabel, because I was living in Virginia and I was very pregnant with my second baby, and we were out without power for 10 days. Is that right?
No. Most would say Katrina, but it's actually Ivan.
Ivan
was 14 months before Katrina. Katrina is the one that basically almost wiped out New Orleans. So in 14 months, the municipality or the city of New Orleans did nothing.
So essentially what you said is that, so if we think about that in relation to an incident, like, what you're supposed to do is, if something happens, is say, well, why did this happen? And then mitigate it. And instead, our government said, well, why did this happen? And then they were like, oh, that's nice to know. And they didn't do anything about it.
Not quite, but yes, they didn't do anything about it, but there's a reason why. And I'm just going to put these all up here. When I did my book for Insured to Fail, I came up with a little over a dozen reasons why business owners that had a catastrophe, because I interviewed 86 businesses that went out of business, even though they had insurance for an insured event. They, like I said, And then there's about almost 3 dozen that had to pump hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars back into their business just to survive. They either couldn't reopen or they closed within 3 years, even though they were insured. So
Wow.
they weren't my clients. I actually have gone through 7 of these and they're all surviving. But these 2 professors, they actually came back with the psychological reasons. And I want everybody to think about it and look in the mirror as to some of these. People tend to be myopic. I got this issue. I got to hire an employee. I got to get inventory in. I got to do. So that's kind of what, and then you have inertia. That's the number one reason why they cited Katrina issues with New Orleans. Well, there's so much we have to do. They just don't get the ball rolling. You know, so, and they also think, well, the odds of it happening are pretty remote, like once every so many years, or, you know, it's sort of like, well, I live in a floodplain, but it's a 1 in 100 year floodplain. So the odds are I'm not going to have something. Well, that's probably not the case. So you have to think about it as people are inherently going to downplay what could happen. And even if it happened to them in the past, the longer it goes, the less likely they are to do something. And if it never happened to them or a close friend, they're probably not going to deal with it. And that's what we're seeing with regards to cyber. It's like, oh, we are safe. I got bright people. I got all this kind of stuff. We know how to identify something. We're not going to click on it, but yet, guess what happens? They click on it.
Yeah.
So having the conversation this weekend of several meetings with these businesses that had their ransomware events, you know, with the one that was brought, I said, so when you did your analysis of where you stored all your data and where all your information was, you know, they determined they don't necessarily have viable backups in some of the things that they need to do, like the whole client relationship management software program that's on they didn't back up the program. And they don't necessarily, they had the data, but not the program. So then they have to go out and buy the program again, and so to speak, because it was so customized, they lost all that customization. So they have to program some, it was built off of Salesforce or Force.com. So they're going to have that all reprogrammed because they put it on their server, how it interacted with some, I'm not technical enough, but you'd understand, sort of
APIs and integrations.
Thank you, API. That was the coding. I was thinking, to share the data back and forth. That whole bridge was lost.
That's expensive to recreate.
Yes.
That's expensive.
So ultimately, you have to understand insurance. If you look at it, risk management is the process of identifying, analyzing, figure out how best to control it. Then you put processes in place, and yes, you do risk transfer, you do buy insurance, and then you review. So insurance is the 4th step, not the first. So
that's such a great
companies, what's that?
That's a really great point, right? Like insurance should be used when you understand your risk. You shouldn't just blindly purchase it, because like that you have to understand what it is that you're trying to protect and the risk you're trying to transfer. I'm a certified information security manager. So we talk about the 4 different ways that you can handle risk. Well, first of all, you have to identify them. You have to take the time to identify what is our business's risk. And this could be cyber, it could be other risk. And then are we going to mitigate the risk? In other words, take action so we fix the thing. Are we going to avoid the risk? Are we going to stop doing the thing because it's risky? Are we going to accept the risk? Say, I know I might get screwed, but I accept that might happen. Or are we going to transfer it? And one way of transferring it is insurance. But if you don't identify your risk first, you're just blindly buying insurance and then spraying money and then hoping that you're going to be covered.
Yeah, if you don't take the time to go through the entire process of risk management, of knowing what you have and what you need to do with and so forth. 1, how do you know you're properly insured? And 2, if you haven't addressed it, you're going to be paying a lot more. What I went to underwriting school at a local insurance company, I won't mention names, but their logo is red and will keep you dry when it rains. great company, but the one thing I learned from this underwriter I worked with was there is no such thing as a bad risk, just the wrong premium.
Ah,
You just might not like the price, and
mm,
you have to look at it. So you have to make yourself more attractive to insurance companies. So just even doing the bare minimum for getting your cyber insurance gets you coverage. But if you maybe did a little bit more or looked at what you as an organization did as a whole and did maybe a couple little things more, you could dramatically cut your cyber insurance another 20 or 30% because you would score better and things like
and
that. So,
and
well,
at the same time, like it would be cheaper, and the risk of your business or your organization being compromised would also go down considerably too.
correct. And this is one policy that there's this is kind of like I was how did my client say? He's come to the conclusion that he buys insurance and never wants to use it. And he said after having a cyber event, getting himself cleaned up, restored, and spending 7 figures to do it, then he finally decided to buy cyber insurance. And he says, I feel better, but he goes, it's like my life insurance. I never want to have to use it.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
So, because it's never going to, you will end up having more impacts on your business than do that. So ultimately you have to know where your data is, what you're storing, what your what your plan is, what your restoration plan is. A lot of things you have to be prepared because, and we'll go through this, if you don't have that plan in place, as Ben Franklin says, fail to plan is planning to fail. So take the time and be prepared, identify, like I said, where your data and so forth. So one of the things that we're starting to see, particularly in, let's say, manufacturing risks and things like that, is the hackers are not only getting into the information technology, they're also getting into the operational technology, the industrial control systems. And in the case of our one manufacturer, they, when they went through their analysis, we just brought them on, beginning of February as a client. They went through all their analysis. They haven't gotten they weren't up to speed to get cyber insurance because they didn't have the multi-factor yet. But anyhow, they said, oh, we got all our backups, this and that. And I said, well, make sure all your systems, and I referenced, well, their main control system, it took down not only the computer that takes the orders in from the customers and sends it out to the machines to made, it not only took out that machine, but it damaged the software on each of the production machines. And so they're now having to reach out to each of the manufacturers and have either hard drives, new boards sent with the programs in them, things like that. And some of them are coming from Germany. So it's going to take a while for them to be able to actually get some of their machines up and running, even if they have a backup of their, what do they want to call those? Not an ERP, I can't remember the term that he used, but basically is control system. So you have to know what you're doing. But we mentioned a couple times. So multi-factor is huge. And I know everybody doesn't like it. They hate having to use that, whether it be an app or something like that, Leia, to, log into their email, but the insurance companies only really want to make sure it needs to only be done once, like through your phone, your desktop. Once that multi-factor system recognizes your phone or your desktop, you don't have to do it again. Maybe if your environment changes, I guess. But the concern is if it's for the web browser, because we have seen rather interesting things where they've cloned emails. You send out a legitimate invoice to a customer, and behind the scenes, they send out another email that says, hey, customer, oh, by the way, we're no longer taking cash payment, or we're no longer, forgot to tell you, we changed our banks. I hope you didn't make payment yet, so please pay this. And it's coming from the person, and that is not their fault. that hack was on your side, so you have no recourse when they don't pay.
Yep. And I mean, like, so actually, David, the pain in the buttness about multi-factor authentication is not just the people on this call who are not technical. That comes from IT people too. So you notice in these applications that it's asking, is there multi-factor authentication for access to backups? And what about to things like a firewall? Because I'm telling you, David, like my company has certain standards. So this is, that's when we are managing a company that requires compliance, everything is MFA, access to the servers, access to the firewall, everything. But there's a lot of companies that say, oh, well, it's the users that are going to get, they're the ones that are going to get, hacked. So they don't enforce MFA on themselves. They access a server without MFA. They don't put MFA on the backups. They can access the firewall without MFA because they think they're complacent, right? That quote. So I'm seeing that question on questionnaires these days because that's a huge risk.
So, yeah, and you have to look at the risk. So the one thing that transpired with this one on the one Friday night that I got the call, they determined the breach was actually from one of their machines. The software that the manufacturer uses to be able to update the software on the machine is how they got in. And once they got in, because they did not have multi-factor on their access level security, I might not be using the right term, they were able to run programs as an administrator and start replicating throughout the system. So they had no security levels. Every employee basically almost had access to every data, or somewhere along the way, they actually determined that, I think it was in September is when the key logging virus got into the system, and that's how they got the administrator's password. So long story short, because they didn't lock down through MFA that security level, they were able to push the program out throughout the entire system.
Yeah, and there's a cost for it too. And I think that's one of the pushbacks that I get is that we have to pay for it. It's not that much money. Duo is only like $2 per user per month, which is not very much. I think it's worth it.
Yeah, well, especially when you look at what the potential outlays of money are going to be, and loss of business, loss of customers, the end cost is going to be a lot greater than the in cost, I guess you could say, of setting it up. But ultimately, I know a lot of businesses that do a lot to set up a lot of security, even have monitored systems and things like that. And just so you understand, I've actually had clients that have active monitoring of their system hacked because they cookie cuttered the installation and didn't pay attention and do that identification of risk to make sure all their systems were buttoned up. And a hacker, once they figured out what program was on, was able to do a workaround. So, but ultimately, the weakest link is going to be your employees. So you need to make sure you do some training on that. And some of these are just little simple things like labeling external emails. That just heightens awareness for somebody to say, wait a minute, this didn't come from, my business partner. It came from somewhere outside. I should pay a little bit more attention to this.
So back on employee training, this is actually something that I did some research on. So I studied psychology in college, which actually for being in IT and having employees, it's actually a really great major.
Yeah.
But so I did some research on this because we would train staff on best practices and cybersecurity hygiene, and then find out, like later they would do the exact thing that we trained them to not do, and think like, well, what the heck, we're just getting frustrated. And I'm like, well, what's the root cause? Well, the root cause is actually that when you train somebody on a thing, if they are either don't have reinforcement on that thing regularly, that in about 6 weeks, if it's no longer relevant to them in their head, that it fades. So if you are not consistently having something like IT security tips to the inbox, regular trainings, reminders. People get lax.
Yeah, we have a lot of training for our staff because of the securities and insurance side of this. So software updates and patching are a big issue. You have endpoint protection, which is your standard antivirus. Some of the insurance companies are now looking to see if you've gone to the second generation, which is what endpoint detection or response. I think EDR is the term that they use, more of a artificial intelligence, do some vulnerability scans. I will tell you, insurance companies are going to do vulnerability scans on you. And it's better to find out months in advance of your renewal, if you do have cyber insurance, that you may have a problem, versus, okay, you do the renewal application, it goes to the underwriter gets it, sends it to rating then sends the vulnerability scan. So 2 weeks before your renewal, they're sending you, hey, you have these open ports and things like that. So that's why we tend to like to do the scans off cycle, so to speak, as we call it. But what we're finding is, this is another thing, test your backups, test your restorations, because if you go and try to install when you're not under the gun, you'll know how to do it. And you also find out if maybe your backups aren't right. Maybe you're missing data because you can't restore. So you're better off finding out when you're not under the gun to get your business back up and running than, well, basically when you're locked up already.
Yeah, so that's so key. Just because the backup software sends you an alert and says that it completed successfully, it does not mean that you have a successfully restorable backup. That's why you have to test it, because I've seen this. I personally know hundreds of MSPs across the entire world, and it's happened that they're getting these emails that say it's successful, but what's in that backup, they can't restore it. Like it won't actually come up and be usable. And so if you're not testing this on a regular period, you could be in a situation where you think you have good backups and the hacker never got to the backups, but you still can't restore it.
Yeah, and then we already talked about it. Don't get comfortable. So some of the things that you have to look at for cyber, we talked about the donuts. The first thing I need to tell you is there is no standard insurance policy for cyber. Every insurance company is different. Every insurance company is different. And
what does that mean?
Some of them use the same terms, but every insurance company is different. So the language inside the policy, and there's a lot of different policy coverages that you'll see. Oops, we'll like, like liability to other people's property machines. So like when this company sent, the board member had his email cloned, sent out a virus, the company clicks on it. They are now having an issue. They're having to use their own cyber insurance. Guess who's going to get a bill from that insurance company? The business that had the email hack, because they didn't do what is prudent. So you have to make sure you have damages, not only, for that also goes into your credit monitoring, notification costs, all those kinds of third-party liability. We're seeing a lot of media liability where businesses inadvertently infringe on somebody's copyright. They used an improper photo that wasn't royalty-free, or they didn't buy the right license for the right photo. Payment card industry. One thing I want to tell you is everybody says, well, a third party. I use a third party for my credit card. Well, the rule I want everybody to understand is if you collected it, you're responsible for it. Doesn't matter if you're using a third party or not. The buck stops with you. You're going to get sued. I mean, hey, if you don't have coverage, you got to, you don't have defense, but you're the one that's going to get the penalty. And with payment card industry, there's like 250 some rules and regulation that you got to try to comply with. I don't know about you, but that's a lot. And if you miss any of them, guess who's paying it? You. And it might be just the transfer, things like that. It even could be you have an employee that's working for you that when they take the credit card back to, let's say it's a restaurant, happened to me, they cloned my card. They had a swiper to clone your card. And then you get into first party damages, and damage to your system. And you start thinking about, okay, you have a whole bunch of costs associated with like cyber forensics, what occurred, what was taken, how did they get in there? What do you have to do to fix it? Legal costs, these will add up very quickly. Cyber forensics are going to be like $250 to $300 an hour per person that shows up. And you may have a team that's necessary to help you get up and running very quickly. You're going to have an attorney, a breach coach that's going to help coordinate, getting you restored. And the reason why they use an attorney is it's called attorney-client privilege. If you're communicating with your IT people as to what happened, the IT people send you an email and says, well, your guy did this and that's how they got in. That's now discoverable because your attorney wasn't involved. Some of these restorations are pretty significant. So you have a lot of other costs associated, and you may have systems going back to your system. You may have to upgrade, like when you go to try to restore some computers, particularly older ones, they may not be able to take, let's say, you can't put Windows 10 back on now. You got to put Windows 11.
Mm-hmm.
If your system can't take Windows 11, guess what? You now have to go out and buy a new computer. And that cost is picked up. And I'm actually seeing some businesses where I'm not kidding you. I saw one recently that it was saying it was running a Windows NT server for their email server.
Holy crap.
That's 20 years or more.
That's more than 20 years.
Yeah.
25.
And then you have business income. Going back to business income, generally speaking, means your computer system is down. But how many businesses do you know, Leah, that use third-party platforms to run off? That's
a lot.
Somebody else's system. So that's dependent systems that may or may not be covered under your policy. So you have to understand, going back to identify the risk. Where's your information? Where are you using it? How are you using it? And just because it's in the cloud does not mean it's safe. In fact, actually, it's the opposite. It's probably less secure in the cloud than it is in your own server.
Yeah, you're transferring the risk when you put it in the cloud because you're trusting that provider that they're doing all the things they're supposed to.
Actually, trusting is the key word. Read your contract, because some of them are not responsible if you're the cause of the breach.
Wow.
Yes, I've read some of them. Number two, we're getting insurance companies to the point where they're concerned about, let's say, I'm not going to pick up good company. I buy a lot of stuff from them, when I can't find it local, Amazon Web Services. There's a lot of cloud companies out there, but it's not that they're concerned about Amazon per se, but they're concerned about how many businesses are on their platform and how much risk do they have. So they're starting to ask who your platform is on, because they're trying to figure out how much do they have if Amazon Web Services goes down. How many dependent business income claims are we going to be paying? So it's something insurance companies are starting to look at, getting specific on who is your third party provider. Just something to keep in mind as I read the tea leaves. Extortion ransomware. You may see extortion coverage, you may see ransomware coverage, but they're technically two different things. And in some carriers, they're two different coverages with two different limits.
So David, you're talking about a lot of different things that may or may not be in a policy.
Correct.
And all of these things are things that you need to determine if you need it or not. Like, where do you even start? Because, when typically, I've never heard an agent go in this much detail about all the different types of coverages. Usually they say, well, what do you think you need? Oh, you think you need $1 million? Here's a policy. What do you think? That doesn't sound like it's the right way to do it.
No, and exactly. So it goes back, what did we say? Identification. All goes back to that. What do you have? What's going to happen? Because you have to figure out what do you need to insure so that if you have an event, it's covered. And then the second step is figuring out, do you have enough limit? Is $1 million going to be enough? I've had clients that have had ransom demands over $2 million. You negotiate them down, but we've had some clients that were adamant, $1 million is all we need. They've exceeded their limit. It does not go as far as you think it does. And then
Yeah.
thinking about, and when you get into crime, some just say cyber crime. Well, there's a whole bunch of things that could be covered. Did they steal money out of your bank? Did they dupe you out of money? Did they dupe your customer out of the money? Did they manipulate your invoice? All of those have different definitions. And just because you see $500,000 or $250,000 crime coverage, what exactly does it mean? Until you read the form, there's like 6 or 7 different types of crime that could be on a crime policy for cyber. You need 1, 2, or 3 of them if you don't read it.
So I have a question. Let's say that, well, it's clear if you have like we've already talked about how there are certain things you need to have in place to even be insurable. Like
Right.
If you don't have it, you're not even going to get this insurance because you're too big of a risk to the insurance company. So you have that, you have your insurance. How do you determine when there's something that you should make a claim for or not? Because one of those questions is always, have you ever made a claim before? And clearly they're doing that to rate you in some way. So when do you determine when you should make that claim? Like, is there a threshold, or is it just a case by case basis?
Actually, that's 2 points. One, your application is a warranty statement. So if somebody answers in a way that they feel they have to answer so they can get coverage, but it's not true, they are within their rights to deny a claim. And just because you had a prior claim does not mean you cannot get cyber insurance. In fact, it's actually the reverse. Some of my clients, they had an event, they fix the event, they train employees, they do all this stuff. There's heightened awareness now. They're actually going to be a better risk for a period of time until that complacency starts seeping in. So
interesting.
So you have to understand that. Number 2, this isn't the application, but inside of a policy, the language itself, it's a contract. You have to follow the contract. In that contract is duties of the insured. And we'll probably end up going over because of this, but I need to stress this. If you walked into your office today, Leia, and you had a broken pipe and water's running across the floor, I'll just dispense with the what would you do kind of question. I'll just say most people would turn off the water, call a plumber. While the plumber's fixing it, they're cleaning up the water, trying to mitigate it, trying to dry it. They might even hire a disaster restoration or resource. Some companies start cleaning it up. And then, oh, by the way, call their insurance agent, turn the claim in. And under a property policy, go right ahead. That's perfectly allowed. It's actually spelled out. You have to mitigate it. You're allowed to do that. And a cyber policy, no. Cyber policy says, don't wipe your nose unless we approve it. You must turn in the claim on most policies to have coverage. And you can impugn or impede your coverage by doing things on your own ahead of time. The fact that it says anything you agree to or do ahead of time may not be covered. And they do have the right to deny the rest of your claim if you did something that adversely affected the claim.
So you're saying that if you had an incident, a cyber incident, and you called your IT company and they responded because in good faith, they're just trying to save you, that action could actually like nullify your policy and you'd not be covered at all?
Yes, they could. Yeah, probably 80–90% of the policies, yes.
Wow. Wow. That's important to know. So you need to know what to do. You need to have a plan. Oh my gosh. Isn't that crazy? In 2 weeks, we're going to talk about that plan. Yes,
we are. But yeah, so there's a lot of things you have to understand and go through with regards to these policies. Getting the insurance may seem like that monumental task to a lot of businesses, but in reality, that's the easy part. Being, trying to keep yourself, secure, trying to understand. And then when you have an event, going through it, it is a living nightmare. I mean, I'm talking, there have been people at this plant working 20-hour days trying to get their systems up and running since Friday night. The chief information officer, he got the phone call that this was occurring, and he was there for over 24 hours. And I finally said to the owner, you can't let him do this. You need to get more people in there. It's going to be forever till he does it himself. Plus, we don't even know what's going on. And this was for the one that didn't have insurance. You know, so it's, but you have to ask a lot of questions. And like I said, one of the other advantages is when you call these, they have immediate resources. They know who to go to. They can bring in the team. I mean, we've had events, we get a phone call, I think it was like mid-morning, when employees started complaining that they didn't get their paycheck. And by mid-afternoon, late afternoon, there was a team of cyber forensics trying to figure out, how did this occur? How did they get into the payroll provider, the third-party payroll provider? And they even got them a check over the weekend so that they could do payroll on Monday again and pay their employees, because you can get immediate resources. We talked about duties of the insured. So, and then the limits, $1 million sounds like a lot of money, but when you start adding up forensics cost, legal costs, damages, notification, think of it this way: every person that you have a breach of identifiable information is $250 to $300. Multiply that out.
Yeah.
You could be, some businesses may be looking at potential millions of dollars of release of updates of system, loss of income, loss of future income, because you now need to hire a PR firm to help improve your reputation because you had this hack and personal information was taken.
Oh, that's huge. I'm so looking forward to our next session about incident response, because there is so much to talk about, like to get prepared for that and what to do afterwards. And I know that you and I both have horror stories that we can talk about to help people understand what they should do and what they should not do. So what is it that we need to do now? Like, the people that join this call, clearly they want to know what to do, how to take action. They didn't want to just come here for education. These are people of action that want to go away and then want to have an impact with this information.
Well, yeah. So action steps, obviously they need to do an assessment of where they're at. I know you've done some assessments for some of our clients and found some, what they needed to fix so that we could help them get cyber insurance. That would be a very good first step. Completing an application is a very good step, because based on that, we can determine, because if you can't qualify for insurance, you should at least be able to qualify for insurance. Then, because if you're not doing that, you're not doing the bare minimum. Then you can move on to the next step of trying to go a step further. You have scanning capability. I have the cyber risk questionnaire that we have. So I would say basically, and then if they do have cyber insurance, they probably need to read the policy.
It sounds like it, right?
Yeah. So, or at least ask a lot more questions, but ultimately, doing that, I know you guys do, you do assessments for free. So do we.
Yes. So because you guys came today, we wanted to be able to give you or offer you something to have some idea about what your risk is. We keep saying this in case you haven't caught the theme, that if you don't know what your current risk is, it's really difficult to understand how to mitigate it or how to transfer it. So we are offering all of you that came to the call today a risk assessment. And when if you say yes to this, again, it's completely free, no obligation. It's very simple to be able to do. But if you do say yes, then you're going to find out if your systems are really secure, and an idea about where some of the holes are. You're going to also know exactly what a hacker could do and get access to. If in fact you could click on a bad link. And the next one, David, is and a health score, so that you actually have a health score you can present. If you aren't that decision maker, you can present it to them and say, hey, look, here's some things that we really need to change. And you can know that before you even go for your insurance or to renew your insurance. So the 3 things that you need to know: there's no obligation. You don't have to buy anything from either one of us when you have a risk assessment. We are here because we have a passion for what we do. But we want to make sure that we're giving people the right information so that you can manage your risk. We can only offer, okay, it says 7, but if there's more than 7, I'll still help you, I promise, because I want to make sure I get this in everyone's hands. If you have more than a couple of computers, this makes sense for you. If you have less, then doing this exercise might not make sense for you. And then legitimately, all you have to do, it's very, very simple. We don't need access to any administrator passwords. We're going to be able to do something for you, acting like a malicious actor, simple, and you're going to be able to have a very high level snapshot about your risk and what a hacker would be able to do if you clicked on a bad link. So all you have to do is email info@intechit.net with the subject, "Tell me if I'm safe," and then our team will hook you up with that. After we perform this very simple risk assessment, then we'll be able to, with David and I, we'll get on the phone with you and we'll talk about what we saw there in that report. The report is yours to keep. And then we can talk about the risk associated with this, how to mitigate it, how to transfer it, or how it might actually impact your insurance or your insurability. And so don't put this off, guys. Like we keep saying, stop thinking it's not going to happen to me. It's going to happen to someone, and hopefully it doesn't happen to you, but we got to be prepared for it. So email us now.
Do we have any questions in the chat box? Or
I don't have.
We scare them so much that they're frozen and they're petrified with fear.
Okay. Well, one person did ask if like what to do as far as like they have an existing policy and I'm not really sure what it is. Should I just ask my existing agent or should I get somebody to take a look at what I have?
Have a conversation. Would be happy to have that with you, but you need to have a conversation, go through, talk about scenarios, things that you're concerned about. And you know, you may be surprised if you actually pull out your policy and read through some of the definitions as to what things are or are not. That, but ultimately, if you don't understand everything that you have and what you need, it's kind of tough to tell you if your coverage is going to respond for you.
Okay. All right. That was our question. So, thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you for caring enough about your business to make sure that you're covered properly. We all know we have decision makers on this call. You know how important your business is to you. It's your most valuable asset, how important it is to your employees so that they can be employed and that families can make money. So we really appreciate your commitment to that, and stay secure, guys. Oh, wait. Oh, I got to thank you. Thank you both for your time.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.